Hey guys, this is a quick review of the Simpiz 5000 mAh USB power bank. I was introduced to this item by a user on Reddit who was using it with a Raspberry Pi computer, and I know I had to get one when I saw the price. This thing is really cheap on Amazon. If you have Prime, it's $5 shipped to your door. So what do you get? When you open the box, you see they've included this weird sort of case wrapper thing. You can use the bank with it on, which is nice, but it's held on by a magnet. And I'm pretty sure it'll end up getting lost. So let's just toss it to the side. Looking at the device's face, you see there's a USB port for charging the bank and another for charging a device from the bank. There are also 4 LEDs that display its charge level if you tap it just right. They don't show up so well on my camera, but they're really easy to see in person. 4 LEDs lit means it's more than 75% charged. The manual and the label both indicate that it can charge itself at 2.1 amp and also charge a device at 2.1 amp. The product description at Amazon suggests that it supports various fast charge methods, but I tried 4 Android phones and an iPad and none of them claim to be fast charging. I would assume that it's realistically charging around an amp or an amp and a half for any device that can draw that much. So something people have asked about is the disassembly of this device. I ordered 2, so I'd still have one in case I broke one taking it apart, and I'm glad I did. I was a bit impatient and just attacked it with a screwdriver on the front side. The right way to take it apart is from the back. You can slide your fingernail under this plastic cover, and there are 2 little screws that let you pop it right out. After taking it all apart, you end up with this. The battery itself is made by a company called Wintonic. It's a 26650 cell rated at 5000 mAh. Wintonic is a Chinese company that seems to produce batteries for OEMs. What I don't like about this is the manufacture date stamped on it is September of 2015. So that means that my brand new device has a 2.5-year-old battery, which can be significant with lithium polymer cells. The product description at Amazon claims it uses a battery made by Sony, but this is obviously not the case. Not to say there's anything wrong with the quality of the one it came with, but this is now 2 misleading statements from the ad. Will you be able to tell the difference between a Sony cell and this Wintonic one? Of course not. They should just remove that from the product description. The circuit board itself is mostly power stabilizers and an ETA 6082 IC that does most of the work. It's a single-chip solution that includes a buck converter for charging the LiPo battery from USB, a boost converter raising the LiPo's voltage to USB, and fuel gauge functionality for monitoring battery levels, and even a driver for the status LEDs. It's purpose-built exactly for this type of device. It's also LiPo-aware and will charge its battery to no higher than 4.2 and shut off at 3 volts to prevent damage. Enough about the inside. It includes a short USB cable about 1 foot long, and you can use it for charging the bank or charging a device from the bank if that device uses micro USB. It doesn't seem like much, but at this price it is a nice extra. So this is something that always bothers me, but it's not unique to this device. The product is listed as a 5000 mAh bank, and it does have a 5000 mAh battery, but that's really misleading. See, the amp rating isn't enough to determine how much power it has. You also need to consider the voltage. The measurement of work is a watt, and wattage is the result of multiplying your amps with your volts. A LiPo cell has a nominal voltage of 3.7, so a 5000 mAh LiPo is going to have about 18,500 watt-hours. This is a number that means something. The misleading part of these devices is that they're USB battery banks, and USB runs at 5 volts. Given the watt-hours we calculated, you can simply divide it by your volts, and the result is the milliamp hours at that voltage. In this case, it's 3,700 milliamp hours at 5 volts. As a consumer, you don't really care about how the power is stored. You only care about how much power you can get out, and it's a much different number than what they put in the description. Again, this isn't unique to this product. I would be surprised if there were a battery bank that didn't do it. That doesn't make it any less misleading. One of the features of this device is that it supports pass-through charging. This means you can use it to charge a device while it's also charging itself. This sounds like a really nice feature for people who use it to power something rather than just as a charger. However, it's not as useful as it sounds. The issue is that when it engages or disengages the charge circuit, it momentarily cuts off the current to whatever's plugged into it. It's more than enough of a blip to reboot a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. If you're using it to charge phones and tablets and such, it doesn't affect those things at all, but some people were wanting to use it as an uninterruptible power supply for the Raspberry Pi devices, and it just can't do that out of the box. There are some options around buffering the power with capacitors or even another small battery cell attached to the GPIO power pins, but that's another project entirely. Again, that's really only a problem if you're using it as a power supply and not as a battery charger. It's a really nice feature that you can plug this into a charger and also plug your phone or tablet into it, and a couple hours later they're both fully charged. Until now, we've just assumed perfect efficiency, which of course we can never achieve. Anything you do with electricity will have a little wasted power that becomes heat. When you're charging the bank, you lose a little bit in the buck converter, turning 5 volt into 4.2 to send to the battery. Internal resistance in the battery loses a little bit storing that charge, and a little bit again when you draw from it. The boost converter, turning your LiPo's 3.7 or so volts into 5 volts, loses a bit. So when we calculated the theoretical maximum of 3750 milliamp hours at 5 volt, that's really not realistic. The boost converter has some loss. The datasheet says up to 95% efficient, but it would be fairly generous to go with 90%. So now our 5000 milliamp hour LiPo is down to 3330 milliamp hours at USB voltage. When it's in use, there's a few LEDs and the microcontroller function that also consume a little bit of power. That's pretty hard to measure, but it's still real. The point is, you're not going to get 5000 milliamp hours out of this device. You're not going to get 3750 out of it either, but can we maybe get 3300? So let's talk about running a Raspberry Pi from this. I grabbed my shiny new Pi 3B Plus with a fresh minimal OS install to see how long it would go. I configured it for my Wi-Fi network and wrote a little script to do a HTTP request every minute to a server that just logged the request. We know the Pi consumes right about 435 milliamp at idle with Wi-Fi connected, so we can more or less predict the milliamp hour draw based on how long it runs. At the 7-hour 45-minute mark, the Pi browned out from the voltage dropping too low. This comes out to a useful capacity of 3370 milliamp hours, which actually beat my estimates. Of course, the problem with running a Pi from this is the pass-through charging. Since it cuts the output power when switching to or from pass-through mode, you can't extend that time by plugging it in. If you have a situation where you can boot, perform a task, and then shut back down, and you can complete it before the power depletes, it could work fine, but that's a hard limit that's going to rule out a lot of things. Now, the only thing I really didn't like about this is the brightness of the LEDs when it's plugged in. It's really dark in my bus at night, and those lights that don't seem like much during the day actually make a surprising amount of light in very dark environments. So overall, how does this product fare? First off, it's not fair to talk about it without keeping the cost in mind. Let's be honest, this thing is cheap. It's impulse buy cheap, especially if you have Amazon Prime. It's cheaper than buying a USB cable at Walmart, and it comes with a USB cable. So the price point can forgive a lot of flaws. But for USB power bank, does it really have any? I wish they didn't hint towards having quick charge, and I wish they didn't claim Sony batteries, but neither of those things are particularly important to me. The fact is, you're just not going to get this much power any smaller or any cheaper. This is a no-brainer to throw in a backpack, a purse, or a jacket pocket. For the Raspberry Pi fans out there, I'm afraid I have a different conclusion. Outside of some pretty specific circumstances, I wouldn't recommend this for powering your Pi. Even a Pi 0W won't last a full 24 hours on it, and nothing you can do is going to stop the clock from eventually running out. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Please put any comments or questions below, and I hope you like this video and consider subscribing to our channel. If you're interested in buying the Simpiz 5000 mAh USB power bank, I've included a link below.